Who would be a Wolves fan, eh?
On goes Bull. People might yet win it here for Wolves. Flash in the shot. What a goal!
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you listen or watching this on YouTube or with your regular podcast provider. Welcome to the Wolves Fancast preview show in association with the Sports Social Podcast Network, fcquiz.app, and the Boston Coffee and Vending Company. Joining me to talk about the Southampton game in the Premier League, Sutty, Dean, and Ali. I want to jump straight in on Southampton, Sutty. They're on track to have this sort of worst points total of all season. But for me, looking at Southampton as a team, it seems like a false position for that squad. They shouldn't be, as little as they are with what the team that they've got. Do you agree, or do you think they're there totally on merit?
Evening, everyone. I actually do think they're there on merit. I think they're really poor. But as seasons have gone past, we've not really performed great against really poor sides, i.e. Huddersfield doing a double over us when they only won 3 games one season. It's a banana skin, this is. We should go down there and we should be bringing 3 points back. And if we do, I think it's game over then. I think that bottom 3 are gone. All we've got to do is beat the bottom 3 and we're safe. So I wouldn't take, apart from is it Diblin, the young kid? I'd have a little dabble with him for Wolves, but I wouldn't take one of their players for any of ours. And I think when you're 4th bottom, and you can say that about another side, I think that speaks volumes. I wouldn't even take Ramsdale. I wouldn't want him, to be honest. But no, I think they are there on merit. I think they probably will be. This might come back and bite me, the worst side in Premier League history.
I think most of the sentiments there are fair. I think a couple of the players are maybe a little bit hard done by for playing in that system with the previous manager. Where are you on it, Dean? Because obviously they started with a different manager. Ivan Juric is coming in now. The whole system and philosophy and style of football has completely changed. And players like Tyler Diblin have been out the side. Ben Britt-Diaz has obviously left. Do you think Southampton have tried to throw everything too early with that squad and then they've completely U-turned and that's been sort of their downfall, that they haven't been able to keep a continuing philosophy for this full season?
I think some of it's similar to us with Gary O'Neill. Like they kind of they were too loyal to Russell Martin before pulling the trigger on him. He had his style of play, like Company with Burnley last season, where they backed him. They were happy to have this style of football and still go down. But you can't then knee-jerk that reaction around Christmas and be like, actually, no, we need to change our style and try and stay in the league. They should have pulled the trigger a bit earlier. They've got some decent players, but I think if you look at the squad, it looks like a squad that would fight relegation. So they are thereabouts where they should be. They've got some good individuals. Mateus Fernandes will be a good player when he matures, as well as Tyler Diblin, but also kind of Harbour Bellis, there's talk about him, but again, he's still very young and quite raw as a centre-back. So he may come good and have a good career, but Walker Peters is someone that I've had as a squad. Like I'd have him as a squad player at Wolves tomorrow, but he wouldn't come in and immediately command a starting position in my first 11. Like Sutty said, you wouldn't pick one of theirs. You wouldn't put him over Ryan or Nels, but if you've got someone that can cover both fullback position, experienced pro, you can depend on him. So as a squad player, you'd have that all day long. But there's only a couple really that you'd think can actually, like Sulemana, he's a bit of an enigma in himself. Like what he's good on his day, but it's not very consistent. But I think if they pulled the trigger too late on getting rid of Martin and trying to change their philosophy in order to get some pragmatic football out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's that gap that we're seeing now, sort of between clubs who are coming up from the Championship and the Premier League. It's just growing and growing and growing, and it's becoming more difficult every year because the amount of money you have to spend sort of at the top of the Championship, Ali, and bring these players in. You see like £20 million, £25 million. You see that in League One now with Birmingham and Jay Stansfield, big money. That they're having to invest in a certain style of player that's good in the Championship, but then that player's not good enough in the Premier League. Do you think that trickle down effect is only going to get worse, or do you think? Right.
Yeah, well, it feels like it's getting worse because this will be the second year on the bounce, won't it? That you've had the promoted teams have all gone down. So it's this. I think that's the first time that's happened 2 years on the bounce, which probably tells its own story. I think I'd listened to something else about this where the year before that, so the year before last, all of the promoted teams stayed up, which kind of booked that trend. So I can't recall which teams it was. It Brentford, was it their year, or yes, they all managed to stay up. So, but the last 2 years, you've seen obviously Luton and Leeds and Burnley come up and go down, and then again it's happened this year. And touch would it be good for us if they all go down with a bit of a whimper. You know, we've got a 6 point gap at the moment. We've not exactly been great, have we? And we're 6 points clear. I mean, that tells its own story. I mean, you can't believe when you look at the table, they've all conceded more goals than we have. And you find that pretty hard to believe that somebody else has defended worse than we have over the course of the season. But yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I think all of those teams down there, don't quote me on this because I could be wrong, but did they all outspend Wolves in the summer? I mean, Southampton spent money on Ramsdale. Ipswich spent quite a lot, didn't they? They did put their hand in the pocket to try and stay up, and it clearly hasn't bridged that gap on the face of the table at the moment. It might change, but I feel like all of those teams down there, other than Leicester, obviously they were hamstrung, weren't they, by the PSR rules, and they were worried about breaching it. They all have tried to spend to bridge the gap, but haven't really come close. And I mean, Southampton are a long way away. Whether they do end up with the worst season ever, I think they probably play better football than Derby did that year, but don't have anything to show for it. And yeah, I don't know for next season whether it will be the same. I think obviously depends who comes up and how much they can flex their financial muscle. But it does feel like that if you look at the league table from Wolves up, all of those teams obviously have now been in the league for at least 2 years. They've had a bit of a buffer. They've managed to get in, sustain themselves. So any teams now coming up, it's going to be that bit harder. There isn't, other than us, there's a bit of a gap above us to 10 points. That's a big gap if you look between Ipswich and West Ham. That's 16 points after only 28 games. So we're a bit of an anomaly floating around in 17th. But that would suggest there is a huge gap now for the teams coming up to bridge.
Yeah, I think it's tough, and the money that's involved in transfers now is bridging on ridiculous. Sort of bring it back towards Wolves, and it was a good point last game against Everton, Sutty. And the one man who I was especially, and I think you probably all agree, was excited to see back in that starting 11 was Emmanuel Agbadou. We see his quality and his leadership since he's come into this side, and having him backing around the side, it's only going to help us in these last 10 games, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Massive for us, he is. He was captain at his last club. Was it Reims he was at? And he was outstanding there. They didn't want him to go. And we just look completely different, don't we, with him in the middle of a back three. Nobody seems to be getting pulled out of position. He drags people in. He tells them when they can go. He's strong. He might play the odd loose ball, but he's our modern day Willy Bolly. Do you remember when we thought we could never do without Willy Bolly? And I think he's the version of Willy Bolly that we've missed for a long time, to be honest. Commanding, big and strong and deceptively quick as well. But yeah, he is a great player for us and an outstanding signing.
Oh yeah, and I think sort of that level of quality, he's dragged other players up with him as well, hasn't he? Like Matt Doherty, we've seen more consistent. Toti Gomez has come back in; he looks a lot more comfortable now, and to see that spread across the team, and it helps us in terms of a defensive shape that we can trust that back three now, can't we?
Absolutely, and let's not. We have massively underperformed, and that's down to, I think, this side and this squad is 10th, 9th, 10th, something like that, if they all perform. But with such a poor start, and let's be honest, terrible tactical nous by Gary O'Neill. This side should be nowhere near fourth bottom, and still a little bit in danger at this time of the season. I think if Vitor Pereira gets a good pre-season in, and just a couple of additions, because I think across the back line we look really good. I know a couple will go this season, this close season. That's the nature of the beast nowadays. But with a couple of good recruitments, especially up top, I think this side has got the makings of, 8th or 9th.
I'd agree with you on that one. I thought we were in that position in the summer, to be fair, and I was quite confident that we were going to do a lot better than we were. And I think in the comments straight away, there's people saying about, I think our position in the table is not a true reflection of the squad, and I think that's true. I think that tactical naivety from Gary O'Neill, and I think you said it quite well there, has shown throughout this season. And I think looking at that Everton game, Dean, we saw this almost kind of a box midfield, because we've got Joao Gomez, we've got Andre, we've got Menezzi and Bellegarde. It's something that we've not seen at Wolves before. But this sort of tactical nous from somebody like Vitor Pereira, who's managed in all these different leagues, he's been successful wherever he's gone. He's done well with the squads. To see him pull something like that out in a very important game against Everton, it was kind of sort of a bolt from the blue for us. We're seeing something totally different, and it's not something that we'd expect from a Wolves manager, is it?
It kind of feeds into what Sooty said about Agbadu at the back, because he's so dominant and the recovery pace is there between him and Totti. The whole team can go 20 yards further forward. You can press that little bit higher, you can squeeze that little bit more, and obviously with the box midfield, Emery was really good at implementing it when he first came at Villa, where he used McGinn on the wing. Everyone was like, John McGinn's not a winger. He wasn't playing on the wing. He was just making that box and creating the overloads. But yeah, it's good to see kind of a different approach when it comes to the tactics. Like Gary was a little bit stubborn towards the end. He was like, I want to play this way, this high octane, which he didn't have the squad to do it because of Yerson being injured, and he was just a bit stubborn with it, and ultimately it cost him his job. One thing I will say is, though, these graphics, the lineup ones, that's probably the best in the league again. I know we've won competitions for it in the past, but it's nearly perfection. You put Strand Larsen where Bellegarde is, and you actually reflect the on-pitch formation, and that's like that lineup graphic's brilliant. But yeah, I think it's good to have a different approach. And if you don't listen to them, Vitor's press conferences are a breath of fresh air. He's very open, and he talks quite openly about his tactics and what he wants from his players. And today's was particularly long compared to usual manager press conferences. I remember all the ones that have been done before by other managers. They were quite short with it, whereas Vitor was quite open. He was talking about how he wants his centre-backs to be the start of the attack, basically. He wants Doherty and Totti in particular to create overlaps, help focus on the wings and give that, because it's quite a narrow, we got the box midfield, you're quite narrow, so everything's down to the wing backs, which I saw Nelson got slated for the Everton goal last week, which that wasn't his fault. His job was to play as a winger, and Vitor basically said that today, that he wants him high and wide. So he's going to leave gaps, but then it's down to the rest of the back five to shuffle across and fill the gaps that way. But yeah, it is good to see a different tactical approach, and Vitor spoke very good today about kind of the relationships between players, and it's not about this rigid structure like a Pep. It's more like the South American style, where it's kind of you react to what the other player does, and you have those relationships on the pitch rather than a pep little Subbuteo game. Like, this person stands there. It's kind of, if he goes there, you need to go there. And it's all about reacting and the decision making, which I think ultimately should create the kind of a better attacking fluidity, and then hopefully some more goals, because he seems to have nailed the defence now. It's now about scoring more.
Yeah, and I think that you just sort of leading me to where I want to talk about next, and that's sort of like trust between players. And we're seeing that squad building, and you look into it. Just, you don't have to even really scratch the surface, but you understand that Vitor Pereira has done the basics right at Wolves, and he's brought the things back that Nuno did in terms of like having dinner together, having meals together, living together as a team. Because at the end of the day, when you're part of Wolves and you're part of any football club, you're part of a family, and doing those basics right only help. And having this sort of like family feel like in the club again, Ali, it's no surprise really that a majority of those players now seem to be giving a shit about each other and caring about what's happening on the pitch. And we don't really have many outsiders now in this squad, do we?
No, it doesn't look that way. And the thing I've noticed, they look like they know what they're doing. They're set up. They've been drilled, as you said, back to basics of, right, we're playing a balanced lineup, players in their actual positions, I think, and they all clearly know what they're doing and are in a formation that works for the positions they all play. And as you say, he's gone to basics. He's clearly focused on, right, we're working on defending set pieces, we're working on getting our shape so that we don't concede as many goals as we were. That's kicking it back to sort of Big Sam days of management saying, look, the first thing you sort out is the defence. We'll work on the attack when we get chance. But we were scoring enough goals. It wasn't really there where we needed the work. It was, you could see one of the last games that's in a way, and you could just see they had no idea, because they'd all been moved around. Every player must have played 3 or 4 different positions, and it was sort of, they haven't got a clue where they're meant to be playing, which is natural if you're being moved every week from central midfield to the back, from centre back to left centre back. It was every week, and you can now see they've actually got, even games that we haven't won, we've played better, we've looked more solid, we've never been pumped, we've never been battered. It's just an odd incident or.
Yeah, we haven't had games like that Brighton the last season where we capitulated, and these attitudes that amongst the players, it seems to be better. Everything seems to be better at the very base level. And one man who's only come back in recent weeks, and sort of, I think everyone's hoping that he gets a goal and gets a bit more form back, is Jürgen Strand Larsen. I don't know whether he's sort of struggling to find his feet or he's struggling to sort of play to his strengths. But I know a lot of people will look at him, they'll go, oh, he's a 6'4", massive striker. We just need to get the ball on his head and he'll score goals. I think that's too basic looking at him, isn't it? I think there's a lot more layers to him as a footballer. And I think Vita's got to try and work that and try and figure out sooner rather than later how we get the best out of him, because his goals are going to be crucial in these last few games, aren't
they? Yeah, I don't actually think he is very dominant in the air, to be honest. Everybody's saying you got to ping crosses into this 6'4" striker. And if you look at his record over the years, he's scored very few with his head. He's more of a box player. He's got no pace, let's be honest. So he's not going to run from the halfway line with blistering pace. Have to put in through by a nice through ball, but he has got to start to step up to the plate. For me, and this is a personal opinion, of course, I think he's been very poor the last few games. His hold-up play has been poor. He's looked weak on the ball. He does seem to get a bit bullied to me, and for a big lad, I don't like to see that. It's not all about scoring goals, obviously. It's about link-up play, but it just doesn't seem to be sticking to me at the moment. So, and I'm sure that he'll be taking a good look at himself as well, knowing damn well he's got to do a lot more.
Yeah, and I think sort of that level of football that we've seen from him, and I think you compare to when he's in the side to when he's out the side, and what we saw this Vitor Pereira, he tried different players in different positions and sort of had this false nine. Do we need him to sort of like step into that role and to sort of do that sort of Cunha thing where he's coming to pick the ball deep and try and involve himself in play as much as possible in order to get the most out of him, and we move up the pitch together? So sort of like Chris Wood at Forest, where he gets into the box late and he's attacking the ball in a different kind of way, where he's coming late into the box, attacking the ball low and sort of playing to that sort of strength where he's in between centre-backs, or he's in between a centre-back and a full-back. He can sort of ghost into that position. Is that sort of like where we need JSL to be, and that's where he's going to perform best?
Well, Harry Kane was renowned for it, wasn't he? Dropping deep, come really deep to get the ball, lay it out wide, and you'd have the likes of Son running in with absolute blistering pace, scoring goals. We've got to find a role for this kid. As I say, he's not ruthless in the air, and at the moment he's not ruthless. And he can't say he hasn't had chances. He's had a lot of chances, gilt-edged chances as well, namely against Forest, Newcastle. So he's got to start to become more ruthless in himself and start sticking these chances away and work hard. Unfortunately, it's part of his job to defend from the front, and he looks a little bit like he's running in treacle at times to me. So he'll know he's not doing enough. And as a centre forward, with the amount of chances he's had, a return of 7 at the moment, not quite cutting it for me. But we need him, especially over these next few games, desperately. And if he scores tomorrow, then happy days for me.
Yeah, I hope he does. I think sooner rather than later, I'd like to see him hit the back of the net. What's your thoughts on JSL, Dean? I mean, I want to use the word longevity. Sort of what is his longevity at Wolves? Is he going to be here 3-5 years into the future?
I don't know. I think that he's got a couple of things that have gone against him since Vitor came in. Is over the season, for anyone that's into the XG nerds, his XG so far for the season is like 6.4, and he scored 7. So it's round about where you'd expect. But the problem is, under Gary O'Neill, he scored a lot of goals from a very small XG. And as Sutty said, he had an XG of like near enough 1.5 against Forest and got no goals. So that his form has dipped at the wrong time. But the kind of the stats and stuff back up what Sutty said about the duels and that. And I'm sure his duel win percentage is like 40%, which is crap. And it's even lower in the air. So he's not an aerial player. But he said he was on the podcast, the actual official Wolves one last week, I think it was. And he said his game is about being in the box, making the late runs, darting in between defenders, getting a nick on it. Like that goal at Brentford. That was an excellent finish away at Brentford. Really good goal. Last minute run, dart in front of the defender, get a flick on it in the back of the net. That's his game. So, but the problem with that is Vitor's system has always been, he wants the front line fluid. He wants the focal point of it to be very much involved in the build up as well. Whereas that doesn't necessarily facilitate Jurgen's skill set. So something's going to have to give. And a lot of the time, it's never going to be the manager. It's going to be the player. So Jurgen even needs to get more involved, or Vitor needs to find a way to get him more involved, or they find something in the middle somewhere. But ultimately, his form does need to turn around, because since Christmas, more or less, it's not been great. He's gone downwards rather than, he started high and gone backwards rather than build himself into the season. It's a little bit as if he's not used to the physicality of the league and he started to burn out. That might have something in it. He's just getting a bit tired, which resulted in the injury. But I'm hoping the form turns around, because he's a decent lad and he comes across really well, and ultimately he can finish, which is cue the he's Norwegian jokes. He's not Finnish, he's Norwegian. But I think hopefully it turns starting tomorrow.
Yeah, I really hope so, mate. I think as a player, he has the right attitude, and he doesn't let the situation. He's never shown that sort of bad side where he's given a bad attitude. You know, he's been upset with other teammates. He's always one who's always tried to get in good goal scoring opportunities and positions, and try to do everything for the team that's possible. Little bit that came out of the presser today. Munetsi, obviously, we weren't sure. We're not really sure what his position was, Ali. I mean, he's okay for the game, according to Vita Pereira. He's training with the team. He's ready to help. What has been your sort of take on Munetsi since he's come into this squad and offered this sort of chaotic difference and been something unique to what Wolves have had in recent years? Do you think he's been a good player? Do you think he offers something that's useful to the squad? And do you think sort of that's helpful to us staying in the league this season?
Yeah, I definitely think he offers something useful. I don't think I've necessarily made my mind up yet, because he's played in so many different positions. I suspect he hasn't played very often in what he would class as his preferred position. But I think in every game he's offered something. I can only really think of the Fulham game where I thought he didn't look, that wasn't his best game. Didn't play particularly well, but he was playing as a sort of false nine. So I could almost give him the benefit of the doubt for that one. And say he's not a number 9. That's never been his position, as far as I'm aware. But I think he definitely offers something. And as you said, he offers something we've not had for a long time. He was in the first few weeks, he was sort of getting sort of comparisons to Dendoncker, because he's that midfielder who he is box to box, and that's unlike what we've got at the moment. He's that sort of, he arrives late in the box, he gets chances. Okay, he wasn't in the first few games particularly clinical, but he got his first goal against Everton. Thought he took it well. It was a good run, and you kind of feel, and it was a shame that he got his first goal. And you think the confidence that will give him, that he then has to go off. But I definitely think he offers us something that we didn't have previously. He's clearly either got a goal in, or he's going to get chances, because he's been able to fashion chances against Liverpool, against his first game against Blackburn. Every game he's played, he's fashioned something. I think at the moment he's suffering a bit from the fact that we've got a very settled sort of formation that has two in midfield, that he doesn't. So both of those positions seem are sort of taken by Gomez and Andre. But clearly, Vitor rates him and wants to play him, because he's putting him in whenever he can. I think the decision tomorrow will be whether he's fit, and then B, does he start, or does he maybe go with a Sarabia or someone else given the opponent? Does he try and move someone in there who's going to have a bit more possession, or does he stick with what he started with against Everton? I think that'll be an interesting one to see tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think it was a bit of a surprise. Obviously, we saw Munetsi and Bellegarde play together in that sort of box as we talked about earlier, and I think looking at the options that we had sort of on the bench, and we will have going into that, as you alluded to there, Sarabia is available, Guedes is somebody who we'd like to see back in there. Sort of looking at how we might set up going into that game, so to say, do you think there is a case that sort of Guedes potentially comes back in, Sarabia comes back in, and we go to this sort of more structured 5-2-2-1 or 3-4-3, whichever variation you want to describe it as? Do you think there's a chance that we go to something like that and we take the game to Southampton and we try and kill the game off early?
He could do. I've got a funny feeling he'll start exactly the same as he did against Everton. I don't see any changes. I don't see him tinkering too much. We've got plenty in our tank to see off Southampton, especially with the added motivation of their head coach saying today in his press conference that Wolves will be closer to being in trouble after the game. He's that confident that Southampton will take us apart. I'd stick that comment up in the away changing room and say very little and tell them all to just read on that. It should give them plenty of motivation to go out there, all guns are blazing, and go at them. They will be quite fragile at home. If we score early, it'll turn immediately. And if we find ourselves dominant in the first half. It wouldn't surprise me if the place half empties, to be honest, because they're that down on their luck at the moment, and I think all their fan base has basically had enough.
Yeah, I think it's tough, and I really feel for a lot of those Southampton fans with the situation they're in, but every part of me wants to go there and win 4 or 5-0 tomorrow, and just that's the end of the season for us and for them. I think that's the ideal situation, but it's something I can't see happening. As always, thanks for everyone who's watching live on YouTube. All your comments. I'm trying to shoehorn them into either the conversation or I'll bring them up on screen as best we can. I try to take just a little break. For audio listeners, there'll just be a couple of ads for anyone on YouTube. We'll be back in a couple of seconds, but we'll just play a little ad break and then we'll come back and talk more about sort of the head-to-head and then last time out against Southampton.
Who would be a Wolves fan, eh?
Welcome back to your Wolves Fancast preview show against Southampton in association with the Sports Social Podcast app, Quiz.app, and the Boston Coffee and Vending Company. We briefly touched on sort of what we would expect from Wolves going into that game, Dean, at the weekend. But last time out, obviously, at Molineux, not really, despite the scoreline, not a convincing Wolves win with the 2-0 with Cunha and Sarabia again on the score sheet. The biggest thing from that game, the biggest takeaway was how we set ourselves up and allowed Southampton, a side who have been inept sort of in this season so far, to come to Molineux, have 71% of the ball and sort of dictate the play. And we play in this sort of negative football. It's sort of was paramount of the way that Gary Arnell was trying to do things. And it was everything that we kind of didn't expect going into the season. It was a pathetic game, really, wasn't it, looking back? And it's something that we want to sort of right the wrongs of going into this away game.
I think the early goal didn't help. So I remember I was in the pub beforehand, and it was in the subway with the lads, and one of them was really slating Sarabia, and I was like, he'll score today. And then 2 minutes in, he scores. So I was like, yeah, you get me a beer for that, mate. But I think it summed up where Southampton were under Russell Martin. It was all fart, no shit, wasn't it? It was literally, they can have the ball as much as they want. They're not going to do anything with it. Like, you can let them just piss around a bit at the back, especially scoring early. I get the premise that we're at home, we score early, we get another one early, that's it, game dead. But I think where Gary O'Neill was, it was very much like, look, we're ahead, I need to just protect this. And we just let them have it, stayed in our shape, then hit them again with Cunha. And then from then, it was literally just, you lads can just play Subuto if you want and piss around with the ball at the back. We know you ain't going to break us down. But it's two very different teams now, which makes it even more interesting. Vito is a lot more structured in his play, so I'd expect, one of the lads said it, I would expect the team to be slight either unchanged or Pablo would come in for one of the either JJ or Manetzi just to give that more creative spark. But Sarabia away from home is not something I'm very much of a fan of. The emphasis is on Southampton to come at us. So do you kind of go for the more physical team and just hit them where it hurts in the transition? I think that's probably the way we'll go tomorrow, is just be resolute and just they've got to come at us, so let them do it, and then we'll try and spring on them.
Yeah, I really hope that we take the games from them and we sort of dominate this the whole 90 minutes potentially. I mean, that's what we need to do, and I think that's what we need to see from a Wolves side going into these last 10. As always, a busy weekend. Liverpool and Newcastle obviously out with the FA Cup, the EFL Cup, the League Cup final on Sunday. Sort of looking at those around us again. I mean, Southampton, the only one with a win in the last 5. Leicester playing Man United, who they're up and down all the time. We've got Ipswich are playing a very good Forest side. It's potentially another good weekend for us, Ali, that we get this positive result against Southampton. That 6 points could easily become 9 going into 9 games remaining. This could be the weekend that we sort of say, okay, we're safe. Not mathematically, but we can feel comfortable.
Yeah, I think if it gets to 9, then we should feel very comfortable. I already think when you're looking at teams who have only managed to get 17 points out of 28 games, if you're then expecting them to get, another, I don't know, even another 15 points out of the remaining 10, that's very optimistic, especially when you look at Ipswich's fixtures, if they've only managed to scrape 17 at the moment out of, 3 wins, 4 wins each. So you're expecting them to 10 games. That would be a massive effort for them to do that. Ipswich are at home. That's the only thing they can probably cling to. Forest have obviously been brilliant this season. Leicester against United, they had a good result last night. United, but I wonder how much that took out of them. Playing at 7 o'clock away on a Sunday isn't a great fixture. But Leicester are just terrible. To be honest, I'm not convinced there's that much between Southampton and Leicester at this point. I think they're both as bad as each other. Leicester are a pretty poor team, so I'd be really surprised if United can't turn them over. So, as you say, we should be at the very least this weekend. We should be looking at least 7 points, if not 9 points clear, which gives us a really good buffer. And you're then relying on both of those teams winning at least another 2 or 3. And I don't actually think that's that likely for them to do it. As you say, it would be nice to just put in a very comfortable or even an emphatic win at Southampton tomorrow. It gives us a bit of confidence going into the next game against West Ham, which is another really big one for us. The next 2 games, we should be pulling minimum of 4, but really we should be getting 6 points out of them. And if we get 6 points out of the next 2, I think it's complete. I think that for me will make me feel comfortable. A win tomorrow and the rest of them lose, I think I will feel at 9 points. It is done, but I'd like one more. I'd like to get 6 more points and feel much more comfortable. But yeah, I feel like Ipswich of the 2 are the more likely to do something if anyone's going to do something. Forest, I still think their league position is unbelievable. I can't believe they're there. So when I look at that fixture on paper, I would, at the start of the season, if you said Ipswich are home to Nottingham Forest, I wouldn't have said that's a comfortable away win. But if you look at form and where they are in the table, obviously you really hope Nuno does us a favour there.
Yeah.
And frankly, we shouldn't. We're at Southampton. We should be beating Southampton, and as a minimum, then we go in. The status quo is maintained. We keep that 6 point gap. If we can get it up to 9, then we really shouldn't be. That should be it, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I would hope so. And I think sort of looking at these next couple of games, sort of, we get, as Ali has alluded to there, 4 to 6 points. All that pressure then goes on to Ipswich for that game at Portman Road. That we can go into that, we can be a little bit more comfortable. And if we'd have said that sort of a month ago, 2 months ago, I think people would have called you insane. And to find ourselves in the position that we are, it's nice to breathe a little bit of relax there, isn't it? And to think that we could be going into that game with no pressure on us and all the pressure on Ipswich.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I said a few months ago, if we go to Ipswich and we were on level points with them, we would be bang in trouble. But if we can go to Ipswich 9 points clear, well, you could basically say 10 points clear with goal difference, then we're right. We are in the driving seat. I think I actually think that they'll fall away. If we win this weekend, I don't see Ipswich getting anything off Forest. And I don't think Leicester will get anything off United either. They're poor. They're poor sides. The bottom 3 is, well, let's be honest, is terrible. And that's what saved our skins this season. So I'm feeling pretty optimistic now. It's not been a good season. In fact, it's been pretty naff, hasn't it? But that's not Vitor's fault. That's down to a board that dragged its heels far too long, giving Gary O'Neill too much time, and he wasted too many games. I still believe if Vitor had come in after Brentford, we'd be halfway up the league now. But we're safe. I think we'll be safe. I think we'll win tomorrow, and I think that will really, really cut us off from that bottom three then, and we can start to sort of look up for next season and enjoy a few games that are left.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it, and I think we can feel going into these sort of last games. I think we can feel comfortable. We can feel relaxed. We can enjoy the football. We can kind of get Vitor Pereira then setting himself up for next season and life without Cunha and how Wolves evolve going into the next season. I think that'd be really, really nice to get the last sort of 5 in there.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got it. We've got to look at the positives now. We've dug ourselves out of this hole to a certain degree. We're nearly on the top run of the ladder, coming out of a big dark hole. What was this season? So we've got to look at the positives of it now. And the man's done a great job, really, and he's always positive as well, isn't he? He's never negative. There's never an excuse. If we play poorly, he says we weren't good enough, and I like that honesty of the man, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think sort of that accountability is always a big thing, and it's a bit of a buzzword for a lot of people. But I think Vitor Pereira holds himself accountable for everything that he does wrong and everything that he sets up in Wolves wrong. And I think that's the total yin to yang of what O'Neill was doing, and O'Neill was trying to deflect everything and say, "Oh, the odds are against us," and set these things up in a certain way. I think sort of that accountability helps the team focus on what they've done wrong and move forward. I take a step sort of away from Wolves and away from the game. Sort of want to know your opinion, Dean, on sort of like the Champions League situation this season's a little bit strange. We've got some teams who are traditionally, not going to be in there, who we didn't think would be involved in there. We've already touched on Forest. I'd like to know who you think is going to finish in the top 4 this season, because I think it's so open, and you look at the gap between sort of where Villa are and where Arsenal are. It's only 10 points. So who do you think is going to finish in the top 4 this season?
Swap City and Forest round, and I reckon that's that.
Yeah.
I think Newcastle may drop off. Somebody else may get 6th, 7th because of the injuries they've got. But I think the top 4 will be it will end up with 4 of the usual 6 in there.
Yeah. I think sort of Chelsea and their running and where they've been sort of building strength to strength, I can see them definitely finishing in the top 4. But for you, Ali, is there any sort of chance that we could see Forest finishing in the Champions League places? Could Newcastle and Brighton, could they potentially make a late run as well? We could see City, potentially Chelsea dropping out of those top 4 spaces.
I mean, I'll confess in a WhatsApp group with some mates. I predicted after Forest beat Wolves at Molineux, I predicted Forest wouldn't even get into Europe. So I've been sticking to that ever since, even though it's looking less and less likely I'm going to be right. I thought they would fall away, and they haven't they haven't done it yet. So I agree with Dean. I think City will finish 3rd. I think they still will get there. I think Chelsea probably will hang on to 4th. So that drops Forest down to 5th. Out of the next 3, I still think Newcastle, Brighton and Villa will all finish above Forest. I'm just looking at the points now. So they need 6 points. Yeah, there's still 10 games. I think the difficulty comes when Forest have done unbelievable to be where they are. And I felt like Wolves had the same thing years ago when we flirted with top 4 and top 5, and then we ended up we got into 7th twice. I feel like the pressure really cranks up when you're expected to win games. When you play teams and they say, right, well, you're expected to beat them, so go and beat them, and they sit back. And I don't know if Forest have got into that phase yet. They probably are pretty close, and they've not let themselves down yet. But I've always felt that when it come over the course of a season, that last third quarter of the season is where sort of even teams that have underperformed. You've seen Man United, you've seen Spurs do it in previous years. they've had terrible seasons, but have managed towards the end just to work their way back and get themselves back into the top 6. Clearly, Spurs and United are not going to do that this season because they've left themselves too much to do. But I think if Newcastle have now, I think it's going to be difficult for them because they've lost a couple of their bigger players, haven't they? So they've got some really bad injuries going into the weekend's game in the Carabao Cup final. And I think whether some of those injuries are more long term, I think Lewis Hall might be out for the season. So some big players for them who are now out. That's going to impact them. But I could see Villa or Brighton putting in a run. So as Villa have got the Champions League to focus on, so whether that takes sort of their focus away. But I think Forest will fall away. But it's whether there is still every possibility they could get 5th, unless one of those teams, Newcastle, Brighton, or Villa, or Bournemouth, put a bit of a run in. Put a run together. It's 6 points. What is it? 7 points to Bournemouth. So it's a decent gap to make up, isn't it? In 10 games. But I think City. I think the top 3 will still be Liverpool, Arsenal, City. I think Chelsea will stay, as you said, and then it's whether one of those those other teams can put a run together and catch Forest. It's very. I think it's really exciting. It could be the only thing that's up really for grabs, isn't it, at the end of the season? Why you asked about it, because I'd like to think the bottom 3 is going to be decided. Looks like the Premier League's decided, so it's going to be who's getting in the top 4 or 5 next season.
Yeah, and sort of looking at the Champions League situation there, so potentially could have 5 because Man United, obviously, they've announced a new stadium, which I wish we would do at Wolves, and we'd update and carry on with what we'd done. They've announced the new stadium. They've had a shit season. They've got probably the worst Man United squad in the last 20 years. But potentially, they could be playing Champions League football next season, despite finishing in the bottom half of the table. Do you think it's possible that they could win the Europa League, given their current situation and their squad and what Ruben Amorim's trying to do?
Well, they could win it, and they're kind of side that can win it just because they're Man United. I think it's highly unlikely they'll win it. They're just, as you say, they're poor. That's probably the worst Man United side I've seen since the mid-'80s. It is that poor. So I don't think they'll win the Europa League. I think I'll go against the run of the lads here. I think Forest will finish 3rd. I think they'll just keep plodding away, picking up scruffy victories, being tight at the back, structured, and very, very hard to beat. But like anything, if you get the Champions League or any European football, the following season is huge. And you usually, unless you've got massive squad depth and an owner with very deep pockets and the ability to be able to spend money, because you've virtually got to have a second starting 11 for your European football. So I don't think United will win the Europa League, but I do think that Forest will get in the Champions League.
Yeah, I kind of hope so. I mean, I've got Forest. I don't really care too much about
as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It's like I said, we probably don't care too much about Forest, but I think a lot of us Wolves fans, we don't begrudge Nuno doing well and seeing him, achieve and do what he's doing and being able to do it. It's great, but with Forest, it's one of those. Comment in the YouTube since when have we been Man United? I think kind of like getting into that position. I want us to get to a position where we could just talk about other games and sort of be quite general in what we talk about in terms of preview for the weekend, because our season's kind of like coming to a position where it's almost over, and I want that to be sooner rather than later. Sort of bringing it back to the Wolves game quite nicely, and sort of bringing it back to the Southampton game. As always, Little Dan always brings in sort of some odds and some betting for the weekend. I know most of us ain't betting guys, but as I always say, as a caveat with it, if when the fun stops, as they say. But I'll talk about some of the bets that he's put on there. I'll come to you first, Dino. I mean, are there any sort of like bets that you'd be putting on at the weekend? Anything that you sort of looking is sort of like a nailed on? I mean, there's obviously the ones there that little Dan's put on. But is there anything that you'd be looking at, and this is really, really likely to happen?
I don't like the corner one because we don't tend to get down the wings very much. We tend to go bet builders. To be fair, there's a group chat that I'm in at the minute that we're going to start doing a bit of an accumulator on. So we may have a look at that later. I think Wolves 2-0 is decent value, I think, at 10s. I'd probably whack it into an accumulator, though, and kind of have maybe Wolves 2-0, Gomez to get booked because he's not been getting booked lately, so his luck needs to end soon. And then maybe have a goal involvement for Manetzi. So after he's broke his duck, should get decent odds on that.
Yeah, I hope we see another Manetzi goal soon. I think it's just fun. I think he's just a fun player to see, and I think him getting more goals and being more involved is only deserved in his style of play. Sort of, what would you be looking at, Ali, in terms of something that would likely to happen in the game? Obviously, with what's on there on the screen, or is there anything that you'd say, okay, this is nailed on to happen? This is football cinema, as it was.
That's a good question. I mean, Southampton their record is pretty woeful. I don't want to say anything that's anti-Wolves because it would just be us. So if you look at some of the stats, we've not had a penalty this season. Probably the only team not to have one. If you were a Southampton fan, you'd probably bank it if it was going to happen. It's going to happen against them, given the season they're having. Nailed on. I mean, there's got to be an Andre or Gomez booking. It's got to be pretty much nailed on. If Sarabia starts, whether he talks himself into a booking. Sarabia assist, I could see if he started. As you say, I think a Manetzi goal. I mean, it's got to be nailed on for a Wolves win, hasn't it? And 2-0. I'm with Dean. He's stolen my answer. I would have said 2-0 Wolves as well. I think it's got an early-ish goal, and then and I think even if we scored too early, it just kills the game, doesn't it? And as Sussy said, probably empties the ground. And then the second half's just a bit of a procession, just knocking around, and both teams wanted to get it over with. Probably nailed on that if Wolves are winning, the ground will be 50% empty by 70 minutes. That's probably nailed on. It's got to be a nailed on Wolves win, and I'd be with the 2-0.
How about you? So, you want to try and win an Oscar for a bit of football cinema. What do you expect to happen? And it be nailed on to be to win, sort of like a footballing Oscar, as it were, from the game tomorrow.
Well, I'm going for a 3-1 win. I'm going for Manetzi to score his second goal, and it's set in stone that João Gomez will get booked. But I can just see, I feel good about tomorrow. I'll be going there again. I could go everywhere. And I can see us being a couple up at half time. And if we're a couple up at half time, that place will just turn. And a lot of them will just go home. So we've got to go at them and give them a real good thumping in the first half. And press them hard and make them make mistakes. But I'll go for a 3-1, Manetzi to score and Gomez to get a booking.
Yeah, I like that. I like the sound of that. I mean, sort of, I'll round up. Sort of, are you sticking with your prediction tomorrow as 2-0, Dean? And who? Go on, give us a goal scorer. Are you going to go with Manetzi or?
Yeah, I'll go for both. So I'll say Totti header, Manetzi goal.
Totti Gomez goal would be brilliant. And really sum up his comeback since he came back into this Wolves side. And I don't think anybody begrudge him a goal going off his recent performances. And are you sticking with 2-0, Ali, and a goal scorer?
I'll have Agbadou for his first goal and Manetzi as well.
Again, two fantastic individuals in recent weeks, and again, you wouldn't begrudge Agbadu getting a goal given the way that he's performed since he's come into this side and been a part of this Wolves team. Sort of rounding it up now. I appreciate everyone who's been involved in the comments tonight. I know it's been a little bit different. I've tried to talk about some of the other games and some of the other sides. I think sort of we'll be heading towards that more this season dies off. What I'd like to see going into it, I'd love to see a Jorgen Strand Larsen goal. And as AH has put in the comments there, sorry, I put the wrong one up. It's about time Leggy Larsen got a goal. I think if there was ever a game where he could get it and against any opposition, it would be Southampton. So I'll put a prediction on as well because I don't often do it. But I think maybe a nervy 3-1, a late goal for Wolves just to seal it at the end. And I think Jorgen Strand Larsen to get a brace tomorrow would be real nice. As I was saying, I appreciate everyone who's left comments, everyone who's been involved in the YouTube. Appreciate you guys coming on and talking about the game. Safe travels to those Wolves fans going down tomorrow. We'll be back on Sunday with a review show about the game. Hopefully everyone's all smiling and happy, and little Dan can bring some absolute positivity going into the sort of game against West Ham in midweek. But yeah, this was your preview show brought to you by Wolves, the Sports Social Podcast Network, FCquiz.app, and the Boston Coffee Company, and coffee vending company. And don't forget, as always, I am a shill. I am the Linus Tech Tips of the footballing world. Check out wolvesfancast.tmail.com for our merch. We're always adding new stuff on there. That's wolvesfancast.teemil.com. Check it out, as always. If you do get Fancast merch, please tag us on the socials. Post some pictures on Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Whatever social media you're using, tag us. Let us know. Show us what you're wearing. And we'll catch you next time. And thanks again. And come on, up you wafflers going into tomorrow. Smash them Saints. I want another video like we had. The iconic video outside of Southampton's ground. I want another one of them. Come on, up the wafflers. Catch you next time.